I think this video is going to be really valuable whether you have a smaller amount of capital and you're looking to get more exposure to the markets, you're looking to take on leverage in a healthy, non-degen way where you don't wake up liquidated the next day. So you want to make more use out of what you have, or you maybe have a lot of capital and you also want to make more use out of it because yields are yields. And if you have $100,000, then you can have $150,000 of exposure in a way that you're not stressing out waking up 10 times at night wondering if you're going to get liquidated. How do you do it in a healthy manner? And Gordon's going to walk us through a really good example in fast track. It's something that a lot of fast track clients have been doing, and I think it'd be really valuable for you. So Gordon, take it away.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Lucas. I think it's also worth reiterating before diving in that this strategy works best when we have kind of a bullish bias on the market. And, with a lot of the events that are happening over the past week or so, new rate cuts, we are, we all have a little bit of a bullish bias inside the UIG right now, and we're excited for the next 6 to 12 months. And David posted this looping strategy article, and we spoke about this with the fast track crew over the past couple days. And it's really about what you were alluding to. It's about how do I get more exposure to the assets that I'm already fundamentally bullish on. And the idea with this interest amplification cycle is that when we're looping, we're supplying an asset that we're bullish on, let's say Bitcoin as an example. We're then borrowing stablecoin against that Bitcoin. We're then using that stablecoin to purchase even more Bitcoin, and then we can loop that as many times as we want. Obviously, it's worth noting the more times we loop this, the more risk we're taking on. And we want to keep the health factor of our loop and lend borrow strategy pretty safe and not over leverage ourselves. But when this is done strategically, Lucas, as you know, it can be a great way to get more exposure to the assets that we are fundamentally bullish on.
Maybe speak
Okay,
to that
so
risk for anyone who maybe heard that. It's like, okay, well, what is the risk? Why do I take on more risk every time I loop it? Why is it more risky if we're talking Bitcoin and stable coins? Could you talk to that if someone's wondering?
definitely, yeah. So normally we recommend taking on something around 40% loan to value ratio when we execute this first lend borrow piece of the strategy. And the reason that we're taking on more risk as we continue to loop is because we're getting more exposure to, let's say, the asset like Bitcoin in this case, in this example, but we're also taking on more debt against the original collateral that we're supplying. So if we start off with $10,000 worth of Bitcoin and we keep looping, we're levering up our exposure. And if Bitcoin drops in price even a small bit after we've looped excessively, then we could end up getting liquidated. So we could lose our capital if Bitcoin drops in price too dramatically. So this is why we want to make sure that firstly, we're fundamentally bullish on the market if we're doing this with, let's say, Bitcoin. And secondly, we don't loop too many times because we only have a certain amount of collateral we're putting up in the first place and we don't want to get liquidated.
You know, a little margin
So
there. People can think of it almost like their house. It's like, well, I think people are traditionally used to putting 10% or 20% down on their house. But I mean, houses prices traditionally don't fluctuate much more than 10%. 10% is like horrible. Bitcoin can see larger fluctuations. So if you're thinking, oh, I'll just put 10% down and take a huge loan against my Bitcoin, just know crypto markets are much more volatile than your house.
much more volatile. Absolutely. So I wanted to share a quick example of how this works in practice because I'm executing this over on Moonwell as one example. So Moonwell is a base protocol for lending and borrowing. And in this instance, I am supplying some Aero. So I'm bullish on the Aero token and I want to
Mm.
hold Aero as part of my bull run bag. But what I'm doing here is I'm supplying Aero on Moonwell and I'm actually earning 17% just for supplying that on the Moonwell platform. And then I'm able to use that 10K worth of Aero to borrow stablecoin against. So I've borrowed roughly $3,200 against that 10K worth of Aero. So, roughly speaking, I'm at about a 32% loan to value ratio there. And then I'm using that 10 or I'm using that borrowed capital to purchase even more Aero.
Mm.
And in this example, I'm looping that, but I've purchased more Aero and I've deployed the new Aero over on XtraFi. And the reason I've
Beautiful.
done that is because I'm benefiting or strategically using the different APYs and the better APYs on XtraFi for this additional arrow that I've purchased with the borrowed capital. And the benefit of that is that I get 21% on XtraFi versus 17% on Arrow. Sometimes that discrepancy is even greater,
Hmm.
but XtraFi doesn't allow me to borrow against it. So I'm using Moonwell to borrow, get that extra USDC, purchase more Arrow, put it on XtraFi, and then the real bet I'm making here, Lucas, is the fact that I'm bullish on Arrow and I'm betting on the price appreciation of Arrow over the next 6 to 12 months. And I'm getting more exposure to this asset that I'm fundamentally bullish on.
I love it. Anyone watching, just know it doesn't have to be arrows. Sometimes on YouTube, I'm a little bit like, there's so much lacking context and conversation around this. Don't just copy this. Think about what assets are you bullish on, and how much leverage would you be willing to take if you are, and if you're not, then just don't do it. It's not the end of the world. Just don't take on any leverage. But if you got a little more experience and you've been in the markets for a while, or you just want to get more of what you got, you could think Bitcoin and ETHs. You could think arrows. Maybe there's some other stuff that you're bullish on and you just want to kind of lever up. That's what we're fundamentally doing here. So I love
Yeah,
it. Thanks, Gordon.
absolutely. My pleasure. I think, like you said, don't over risk yourself. That's a big disclaimer on the video, but this strategy works very well when the market is bullish and you're using your leverage and your risk level strategically.
Have you ever played on those? I did. Like you could take on 50 leverage, 50x leverage with a click of a button on some of those perps. Like what did I used to do it on? What was the big one back in the day that like just did really well during the last bear market?
I'm not sure. The
Anyway,
name is escaping me.
yeah. Anyway, it was like I remember playing with it. I put $100 in. I could get like $5,000 worth of something, but if something moved by a penny, you were obviously liquidated instantly. But there was a few wins. It gets addictive, and I just don't want people degenning this stuff because it can get addictive, and people get hurt if you take on too much leverage. So
Yeah.
play accordingly. With that said, like, subscribe. If this video or anything on this YouTube channel is valuable to someone you know, or maybe a Telegram group or a group you're a part of, share it. We're trying to bring a little bit of order and a little bit of less or no degen, no gambling. I'm looking for the word, but a little more logic, a little more numbers, a little more investing thought process instead of the gambler process. And I think the crypto space really needs it, especially as we see more and more green. We're going to see people taking on leverage against their house and buying assets that they know nothing about. Like we're going to see the same pattern. And I know that's awesome for YouTube and it gets a lot of views. We just want to bring like let's be investors and let's play the long game, not how do we gamble and lose everything. So if you think this could serve a community or someone you're part of, share a video or two, subscribe, hang out. And with that said, we'll see you in the next video.